I don't want it like that.
You don't want it like this?
No, because you probably said all sorts of awful things.
No,
now you're
not really.
trying to make up by being friendly to pacify me.
You're putting your elbows in the...
Now you know what it feels like to sleep with your bones. Ralph is a very sort of complex person. He has many facets. Humanitarian almost to a fault. He always sees the good in people first, and usually tries to maintain that. Very helpful with people, with animals, without thinking about it. It's his nature.
I was born in Washington, D.C. in 1934, September the 11th. And my father was played the clarinet in the Navy Band. He had helped establish the Navy Band after World War I. My mother was very beautiful. It was the third marriage for both of them. Unfortunately, times were stormy, the relationship, and they later separated. They were beyond the age of having children, and so when I came along, it was a real surprise. But my mother always said I was born for a purpose. Perhaps that justified the late birth. I had one brother, two sisters. They were both from previous marriages on my mother's side. I would later discover that my father had two illegitimate children from a mistress he had at that time and continued to have until he died. Of course, they were all older, so and married when I came along, so there was no connection. As it usually is with brothers and sisters, playing together, being together, having fun together. My childhood was basically during World War II, and I would play with the kids in the area. We would play movie themes and jungle pictures, Arabian Nights type pictures, things like that. It was a lot of fun. So I think just about everybody in the neighborhood wanted to be a movie star. Wouldn't that be great? I mean, you could be famous, and movie stars were gorgeous, and they'd make a lot of money. I was a lonely child. I would keep to myself. I was beaten up occasionally at school, and by gangs. And that stopped when I reached about probably 13. A guy in the building was gonna punch me out again, and this time I fought back, and I really landed into him with all of this suppressed anger that I'd had over the years, and I won that fight, and nobody ever picked on me again. Though I don't think I realized it at the time, I had an incredible talent for drawing. And even at school, they always said I was the best artist. At one point, I said to my father, because the teachers and things said, you know, he should probably go to art school. I said, maybe I should do that. And he said, no, I never knew of an artist personally that made a living, so you're not going to be an artist at all. You're going to be like me and go into the military, and that's the way it's going to be. And I said, well, gee, I don't think that way. And he said, well, I don't care what you think. That's what it's going to be. He had saved a bit of money, and when I finished high school, he said, you can go into college with the money, or we can go to Europe. And I never really liked school. We went all over Europe, and it was fantastic. And I was glad that I made that choice, because when I returned, like 2 months later, 3 months later, he died. And I thought that was wonderful that since it was his money, that he got a chance to enjoy it, and also we got a chance to bond. Being gay was never discussed. I never discussed it with my mother. My dad had passed on by then. About 3 years ago, my family had migrated what I had left west, San Jose, California, right near San Francisco, so I went out. And I decided, Paul and I had been together for so many years, longer actually than anyone in my family, which could never remain, no one could ever remain married. They would just marry, divorce, it just didn't happen, despite being Catholic. I would tell my nephew that I was gay, and he looked at me in horror. He said, why did you have to tell me? And I said, well, Jerry, I mean, it's been 40-some years. And he said, gee, that's longer than anybody in the family. I said, yes. And I said, it shouldn't be a big deal. And he, in turn, told my family. When I returned, I thought everything was fine. I continued to send them postcards, letters, Christmas presents. I never heard from any of them ever again. They cut me off completely, and I felt bitter about it, because my family, as it is with every other family, certainly has the skeletons in the closet, and not one of them is perfect in any way, and except they're heterosexual, which makes them appear perfect, I suppose. I appreciate and I admire. Yes, he's a gourmet cook. For him, cooking meals, he says, is therapy. He thoroughly enjoys it. He's absolutely the funniest person that I know, and he's delightful to be around. And so we laugh an awful lot. He has an incredible sense of humor. He's very romantic. He's very caring. He likes to have a good, solid home.
I was born December 15, 1932. I'll give you a moment to count that out, so you know just how old I am. I was born in Manchester, New Hampshire, during the Depression, so there were hard times, I'm told. I don't remember them. Things at home always went really very well. But my parents were sort of quite different, one from the other. My father, at the time that my mother met him, was my great-grandmother's chauffeur. And my mother had her wedding planned already. The invitations had gone out, and some of the gifts had even started to arrive. The family just did not agree or appreciate very much the fact that my mother was going to marry the chauffeur, but they were in love and they were married. They had a child before me who was stillborn. My mother had fallen on the ice, the girl child, and she was stillborn. Then I was born after the first child uh, died. Then there was another child, a boy child that was premature and was also stillborn. And then I had a brother that was born in, he was born in 42. My father eventually became a blacksmith like his father. My grandfather had been a blacksmith. He was one of the eldest of 7 children. And he had 2 brothers who were openly gay, both of whom had long-term lovers, whom became uncles to me, title of uncle. And one brother that swung both ways, and one brother that was available, I later discovered. And my uncle Ernest, who lived in Detroit, had a much younger lover, and they would come occasionally east. And one time that they came from the east, he brought me a boyfriend. I thought it was very considerate. So when my family finally discovered that I was gay when I was 16, it caused a pretty heavy ripple, but it calmed down very quickly. My mother became very concerned, and because she knew so little about gay lifestyle, so she wanted to read anything I could find for her about being gay. And of course in those days this would have been probably 48, 49. There wasn't a whole lot available. There were a few novels like Quadrifoil, and I've forgotten, but I had them and let her read them. And of course in those days every gay novel had a tragic ending.
There was nothing like the newspapers today, the films, the books, the movies, the TV. There wasn't any TV. There was not one thing to tell me that I was gay, not even one. I didn't even know of anybody else on the earth. On the street in Washington, while walking along, coming from a movie, I met a fellow, and his name was Russell Morris, and he was an ex-sailor from World War II. And he said, "How old are you?" And I didn't want to tell him I was 14, but like the girls in the neighborhood were going out with older guys, and they just lied saying they were 18. They just did. And so I said, "I'm 18. And we walked a bit, and we wound up in the Capitol grounds area. It was at night. And as we were walking, he said, "Can I hold your hand?" And we did just a bit. We didn't hold hands in those days as we walked along. And then he said, "You're beautiful. Can I kiss you?" And I had never kissed anybody before, really, and I didn't know how to kiss. So I gave it the movie star kiss, which is you sort of just go right back, and it was just incredible. He insisted on meeting me the next day, and as I lay there in the tub the next day, getting ready, I wondered if I should meet him. And then I thought, if I didn't, I'd never find the only other person in the world that was like me. Back at my place, I lived in a building, and we'd go up on the roof. And there you could see the Capitol from the roof, and we'd kiss. And as far as the sex went, I just wouldn't. This went on for like a half a year. We could kiss and everything, but no, and he was getting incredibly frustrated and at times nasty about it. So finally one night, I gave in, and I let him do me. And he would tell me about gay life gay people and gay books he'd read, which were, I think it was The Well of Loneliness only at that particular time. And while he was in the service, there were people that were that way, and how sometimes they even, went up the other one's butt. And I just, God, I couldn't believe that. I was very religious at the time, and I think I must have, obviously I confessed it, and I was told it was wrong, and so I decided to break it off. And he was just devastated. I had problems for years. I went without any gay sex for years after that because I just, I somehow thought it was wrong. But then I wasn't heterosexual. I thought that was wrong to do anything like that as well. I was actually told it was a sin to masturbate, so I decided to give that up. Actually, my Catholic religion had me coming and going, and today I am not religious at all. I'm an atheist. And the Bible, to me, though it condemns homosexuals, I find myself as like fantasy fiction. During World War II, the Jews that were killed, the earth didn't open up so they could escape from the concentration camps.
A touring company of Oklahoma came to Manchester in, I think it was 1949. And I became so starstruck and theater conscious that I started to take dance classes, ballet classes, unbeknownst to my family. I would go out once a week and supposedly on pretext of meeting some friends, and I would go and take dance classes. My mother finally found out about it because I was washing my own tights and things like that, and she discovered it. So then classes got put later as I advanced to an evening class rather than an afternoon class, and I was leaving the house to go to a ballet class, and I dropped my slippers from under my coat. My father wanted to know what they were, and the gig was up. He certainly didn't approve of or sanction a boy child of his being, as he used to call it, a ballerina. So came the point that the local teacher had felt that she had taken me as far as she could, and so made arrangements for me to study in Boston. And I started coming to Boston every single Saturday to take classes here in Boston with the Rusikovs, who were very fine ballet teachers, and with a modern dancer at the Boston Conservatory, Jan Veen, and with a man named Robichaud. Later on, did some flamenco work with him after I stopped studying with Jan Veen. And then go home, arriving home at 2 o'clock in the morning, something every Sunday morning. At which time, to get even, my father started insisting we go to early mass on Sundays. The Korean War broke out, and I was drafted and went into the Army. I almost hate to talk about my Army experience because I ended up with the U.S. They sent me to a transportation base in Virginia, and I had never and still have never driven a car in my life. But typical of the Army, they sent me to a transportation headquarters. And then finally I got hooked up with the USO in the Army to audition for a show that was going to Europe for 9 months. I became the lead dancer for that show. We rehearsed parts of the numbers and did them in USOs in service centers here in the States. And then we went over to France. I went to France and I needed a partner, so I went to I was stationed in Verdun, and I went to the local ballet company there to see if I could find a partner, because they wanted some pas de deux things, and I had choreographed a pas de deux for American in Paris. So I found this ballerina, Giselle Giraldo. She was the lead dancer with that company. And we became close friends, and getting ahead of myself, eventually we almost married, but as it turned out, she was almost 15 years older than me, and her career was pretty much at the end, and mine was just beginning, and there were a lot of other aspects. In the interim, I became a guest soloist with a company that she was dancing with, a small ballet company called Groupement Artistique Verbe Noir. Very elaborate title for a very small company, but I became a guest artist with them, and they, in many cases, were able to adjust their schedules so that that company would be in a small French city in Nancy or Metz or Strasbourg or anyway. And at the same time, the USO show was going to be there, so I would sometimes Giselle and I would on the same performance. We would do the opening number and our first solo, and then the Jeep would take us to the local opera house, and we would do American in Paris, and I would do it in uniform, and that always went very well. And then come back to the USO show for the finale. And then, when it was time for me to be retired from the Army, my tour of duty was only two years. They wanted me to re-enlist, but I certainly was not interested in that. I stayed and did some more dancing in France with Giselle, and we did various functions, some nightclub work, and just generally where we could get booked, we worked. The very first time that I remember seeing Ralph was in Central Park on that Sunday morning while I was killing time to go to this brunch.
Met in Central Park, May 29th, 1955. I was sitting on a rock sketching. It was the most nothing drawing, a profile of a man. I still have it. And he came by and stopped to talk and look at the drawing and what have you.
I had been out all night, which was pretty much my standard weekend practice, and
then I just didn't talk back.
And he was not very friendly, and I thought to myself, well, screw you. You know, I was trying to kill time.
So you were interested and you know it.
Well, not actually. I got the sour reaction from you. I was bothering you. And just as I was about to go on my way and see what other things were in Central Park that were worthy of my time, he came to life and started talking.
And he was wearing the most hideous-looking green striped shirt. We've saved the shirt. It's a bit tattered now, but we still have it.
I missed the brunch. Went to lunch together, we were roaming around Central Park, and then we went to a movie together.
Wuthering Heights, a re-released classic, very romantic. We went to an area of the park that was very dimly
Central Park
lit, where a lot of activity was going on, people kissing, what have you. And he says to me, "Okay, let's do it." And I said, "I beg your pardon." He said, "Let's get involved. Let's go at it." And I said, "No." And he would later tell me that nobody had ever said no to him. He was absolutely...
Times have changed, obviously.
he couldn't believe it. And later he would tell me, because I did that, that would make me incredibly interesting.
So I walked into the YMCA, and was it the YWCA? Anyway, whichever. And then we made plans to meet the next day and go out in the country. We looked at the schedule, and there was a place called Mountain View.
I thought, how romantic.
So we decided on that and bought round-trip tickets.
Yeah, anyway, there was not a mountain in sight.
But we did spend the day, and then finally he hinted around that maybe we could have sex. So we did. Yeah, in the woods.
We picked flowers along the way, and then we set the bouquet down, and I said to myself right then and there, this is the person I'm going to spend the rest of my life with. So why wait? I'm going to do it now. I suddenly knew.
I wish I had known, because I would have made a quick exit, but I didn't
That's
realize I was
right.
getting myself involved with. So we decided that we'd try to make a go of it, and I went out looking for a place to live, because I was living with twins, with identical twins, and in a sort of menage a trois situation, which was very daring for those days.
And we exchanged rings. Unfortunately, not a romantic setting. It was just in front of the Y, but it was.
And he
it was
went to bed, and I went back to the twins.
Yeah.
And I found a place on East 61st
And this will kill you.
in New York City.
$14 a week, and we split it. To tell you the truth, the salary that you made at that particular time was very minimal, but you actually had enough for everything and could even save a little at the end of the week. I am a commercial artist, and this is where I do my drawing. I'm very lucky to have all of this light in this special room, and being in a very small apartment, fortunately there's 2 rooms. My other half can be in there while I'm here, and it works out really perfectly. Some people like to have a studio, but I do not. I like to be where everything is at, and plus it's a heck of a lot cheaper. I began doing artwork, sheet music covers for Boston Music Company, and when I had enough for like a portfolio, I took it to an art service. And I was really scared about that because I'd never been to art school, and I told them that, and they said, well, you can do work like this, you can work here, and you can think of this as like art school. It'll be like training for you, but you'll be making money, and it's nothing like learning on the job. And so I learned discipline, and I learned how to work fast, and I learned, and I've counted myself as being very lucky because of all the people that draw in the world, I was actually making a living at it. But the things I did, most people wouldn't want to draw, like refrigerators, TV sets, handbags, light bulbs. And after 5 years, I thought, gee, I'm not really getting anywhere. I think I'd like to go on my own, freelance on my own. Actually, it was during the era where people were, I'm going to say, selling their wares in the streets. I don't mean it that way. They would like do pottery, jewelry, leather goods. They'd take it out on the street and they'd sell it. And so I painted pictures right on the street. Flowers, butterflies, mushrooms, zodiac signs, turn of the century ladies. All these things came so easy to me. I do posters for the Boston Ballet, the Opera Company of Boston. Continue to do things with Boston Music Company, sheet music covers. And I could actually sign them now, and I could pick and choose as long as I didn't limit myself too much. And it was wonderful. I felt very free. And then I went indoors, which meant I was hired by a card shop on Charles Street and also on Newbury Street. And I'd sit at a table, and it was the same type pictures, except they became cards, so people could buy cards and original one-of-a-kind cards, and I loved it. In the 70s, the Museum of Fine Arts accepted 2 of my posters into the permanent collection there, and to me that was an incredible highlight of my life, because as with most artists, you don't get into the museum until you're gone. And personally, I like it when you're alive. Plus, it gives you something to work for, meaning like everything I do now or have done since, I realize I have to, put some extra work into it or make it better. Gone with the Wind was my very favorite film, and I'd had the paper dolls to Gone with the Wind when I was a kid, and I just decided to draw a set of paper dolls in scarlet, and the costume designer from the film, Walter Plunkett, was an old friend, and he helped me with the project. And I discovered I made this into a book that I could sell, and both Paul and I were surprised that anyone would even buy paper dolls. And after that book, it was a book on Marlene Dietrich and Greta Garbo and this and that. I do all these carefully researched costumes. So today, I'm actually, surprisingly, the art has transferred itself into doing paper dolls, and I like that very much, because you do one set of paper dolls and you just keep having it reproduced and you sell the reproductions, whereas in the past it would be one original after the other, and that can really wear you out. I love doing the research and the artwork, and I'm very much into costumes from films and films. And so today I have over 100 paper doll coloring books and a huge amount of celebrity paper dolls. A lot of the celebrity paper, a fair amount of the celebrity paper dolls I've given actually to the celebrities themselves, and they've always liked them very much, which pleased me. People like Joan Collins, Joan Crawford, Jane Seymour, Alexis Smith, Elizabeth Taylor, Shirley MacLaine. It goes on and on.
I had always been a fan of Dietrich's as a kid growing up, although I must admit she was not my number one favorite. I was a Maria Montez or Betty Grable fan, but I loved Dietrich, and I had seen her once in New York at the opening of a show, Paint Your Wagon, and gotten her autograph, and she had been very charming, and I got sort of starstruck. So when she did come to Boston, I went to all the performances and made a point of going backstage, including opening night. Having been involved in the theater and stuff, I knew my way around, and I didn't go around to the stage show, but went through the house, and I'm standing there within view of her, because she was very much upset with the lighting on that night and the sound, and she was screaming about all the things that had gone wrong, and she threw a hairbrush, which almost hit me and landed at my feet, and I picked it up and brazenly went over and said, "I think you dropped this, Miss Dietrich." So, for some reason, we just hit it off. She gave me several 11 by 14 beautiful, beautiful hardstock photographs by Engelstedt that she signed for me, and I had gone to the theater with several friends that night, but they hadn't gone back. They were all standing at the stage door, and when I came out of the stage door with all these great photographs that she had given me, I made quite an impression on everybody. It was in 1961 during the Kennedy inauguration. But here in Boston, it was the time of one of the worst blizzards in history. So on the last night, she said from the stage, although she doesn't normally do closing night speeches, she made a point of thanking. And then she said, quite to my amazement, I particularly want to thank one young man who's been here for every performance, and he's sitting right here in the front row, and made me get up, that I was flushed and embarrassed, but delighted at the same time. So her next engagement was not going to be till about a month later, and it was going to be in San Juan in Puerto Rico. So I decided to take a vacation, a long weekend. In those days, Burt Bacharach was the conductor, and he was for the first few years that I worked with her. She stopped the rehearsal and said to Burt, "Look who I found in the lobby." And then I was going to leave on Sunday to come back to work for Monday, and she talked me into staying through to Tuesday. And then from there, the first time I saw her after that was a few months later. She was at Concord in the Catskills, and her dresser was not there. And in those days, she did a change from the evening gown into top hat, white tie and tails. And it was done between 30 and 45 seconds, this whole change. So she needed someone to help with the change, and I knew the show so well, so she asked me to do it. And then from that moment on, I started getting phone calls from her, and she would say, we are opening at such a place on such a date, your tickets are in the mail. Not once in the 13 years that I worked for her did she ever ask me, was I available, could I come? It was always, your tickets are in the mail, we rehearsals on such a date, you'd be there. Yes, and that's the way it was. And I stopped working with her in 1974. I had done a 9-month tour with her, a tour that included, that I had said I wouldn't do, and she called me at 6 o'clock in the morning, and she said I had to come down to open her because the people didn't know what she wanted. She needed a ramp because it was a theater in the round and the dress is so tight she needed a ramp to get on stage, and they weren't understanding what she wanted, and I had to come. By then I had become a stage manager. I had started out as a whipping boy, errand boy, flower boy, confidant to her, then bodyguard, escort, and finally I was being paid as a stage manager. I found myself on my way down, her opening was that night. She talked me into staying for the next couple of days. The second night she fell off the stage and injured herself very badly. So that began what turned out to be a 9-month tour that I did with her, and it included 6 weeks in Methodist Hospital, registered as her brother, because a blood relative you had to be in order to live in the hospital with her. So it was a very hard tour, and by the end of the tour, things were very, very strained. Her husband was quite ill, was dying of heart condition, and she was drinking very heavily, and it just got to the point that we were not hitting it off very well. And I informed her that I was staying in Mexico for an extra week, and because I'd met a very charming young man there, and he was going to spend the week with me. And she called the hotel that we were staying at, informed the management that she was no longer responsible for any of my bills as of noon that day, which I certainly hadn't expected her to be, and that a very young man was staying with me that was not registered. And I saw her twice after that. Once, ironically enough, went to see her at the North Shore to review her, and then another time that I saw her in Connecticut, she became a recluse. She moved to Paris and became a recluse. I called her just once in Paris for her 85th birthday. She was not too happy with that. She never liked admitting. I just said it was such an important one that I thought I should call her. That's the Dietrich story. Century Fox was going to be filming Carousel in Booth Bay Harbor.
So Paul says, why don't we just go down and see if we can get a job as extras or something
down east to down Maine
in the movie. And so we did. And much to my surprise, when I asked if there was something for us, the assistant director said, fine, you'll do fine. And I said, but you don't understand. We will really work hard and do anything, and we really want to just have a chance. He said, well, you're hired, you're fine, we can fit you right in. I just wasn't getting it.
We sort of filled in all sorts of capacities.
And stand-in.
And we were stand-ins for the two of the stars of the film. Originally the film was supposed to star Frank Sinatra and Shirley Jones, but it was when 55 millimeter first came in, and they had at that point to film it. They had to film it in 55 millimeter, and then in 35 millimeter. They hadn't discovered a way. It was a brand new process, and they hadn't discovered a way to reduce it. So everything was being done in 2 takes.
I loved it.
Two finished takes. So
I hoped the film would go on forever.
And when Sinatra came to see what was what and decided he was not going to do each scene twice, 2 takes. So he left.
He'd gotten an Oscar, and he couldn't do all that emoting, and so he stormed off the set
after
wearing a coat over his shoulder.
By October, we were doing June is Busting Out All Over number, because we were doing all the scenes with Shirley Jones and Robert Rounsville and Barbara Ruark.
And I told everybody about my one line, come on to the clam bake. And so I was in a state of shock when we saw the film and it was gone. I actually sat through the film again thinking maybe I missed it.
I'll tell you why it was really cut out. In that same scene, the director had been trying to get it, and there were seagulls. There was noise. It was on location. There was always noise, particularly seagulls, because we were on a wharf area, a restaurant. And he would do his line over and do it over. And finally, they got a take on it. And Ralph, there was an outhouse.
That doesn't
right?
tie in
Very
with this
close.
scene at all.
No,
because
but it's you had aggravated the director, Henry King,
okay.
and he went in and used it and flushed during a very intense scene.
I didn't realize that the toilet was on the wharf, so when you flush,
It just went down into
went
the.
down and hit the thing and made a huge sound, as the water hits
And
the,
he came out of the job.
How did I know
Everybody
it
was
was the
standing
scene?
there looking at him with such.
with
Yeah,
glaring.
So that's ended his career.
I cost 20th, hundreds, thousands that day. Our relationship, we were going to have to leave New York because, sad to say, there were too many people that would try to, there were some that would try to break you up just because it would be a feather in their cap. They were interested in you, but also interested in wrecking your relationship.
Plus, all of my friends tended to be the party animal types, and the very sort of from one person to the next. So I was probably more afraid of my own friends trying to break us up than strangers.
They had said to me, he's an incredible whore, and
I beg you.
and this will never last ever.
He was so prim and prissy, and I was party animal. As it turned out, we went to Portland, Maine, which was as far away from getting, New York as we could think of. And Ralph wanted to paint, and we wanted to be near the ocean and stuff like that. And then we moved to New Hampshire, to Manchester, which is where I'm from originally. And we lived there for 5 years.
We had a little apartment that was in like a tower, and we had gotten a Siamese cat, which Paul would walk on a leash, which was a little much for a little
Manchester.
town.
with a jewel collar and a...
I think people had never seen a cat, and so they would
People would ask
assume
me,
it
what
was
kind of
what
dog
kind of
is it?
dog is that? So in any case, the store that Paul worked for fortunately burnt up.
I've always said I thought Ralph set fire to it, but...
And we had to make a move, and I was just so glad to get out of a very small town. And so anyway, I loved coming to Boston, and when we first moved to Boston, Paul had found a place in Bay Village, and to be living in a gay area was like incredibly unbelievable, because you had to be so closeted in Manchester. There were times that the toughs from Southie would come into the area. It was,
They knew it was a gay area.
it was called Gay Village in those days. It was all gay people. They had made a slum into something very nice. And they would come in and they would just come in a
Harass and
gang
destroy things.
and just wreck everything. They'd break the trees down, they'd smash the windows, they'd pull the window boxes from the things, they'd pull the shutters down, they'd just go on a rampage.
That was in the early 60s, and then if you call the police would sort of pat them on the wrist and say, now, why don't you behave and go home and just... Obviously...
I remember one time we'd call the police, and I went running down when they arrived to confront this gang with clubs. And I said to the policeman what had happened, and there was all of this trail of destruction, which happened periodically in that area. And the policeman looked at me and he said, "What are you trying to do, make trouble? Get out of here." And I couldn't believe it. I had discovered that being gay, you didn't have the same rights as other people had when their property was destroyed. And so it made me quite bitter about that. And he went over to the guys and laughed with them and patted them on the back. And he said to them, "You've been drinking a bit, why don't you go home?"
And let them get in the car and drive home, although they were quite inebriated.
So fortunately in that area, there was one tough lesbian who would not take it. And she went up to one or two of them and she punched them in the face a few times, and they didn't dare hit her because she was a woman. And yeah, and boy did she lay them out. Unfortunately, they had ripped one of her window boxes down and they had to pay for it. Every gay person would paint their shutters and window boxes, but you could not have that particular shade or color. You had to have another one. In our house, we picked orange. And pretty soon, after 9 years, it became so expensive that we could no longer afford to live there. So all the gay people that had made it into something nice, as it is in the South End now in Boston, had to leave as people with money.
More and more of the places that became townhouses,
Yes.
which they had been
And drove
originally.
us out.
But even in New York, as liberal as New York was considered to be in 1955, it was very, very difficult to be gay. And compared to today, night and day and then some. I mean, it was another century, it seems.
It was.
Well, yeah, actually it was another century. You couldn't get places to live that would rent to you if you had same sex, particularly men. Women had an easier time of renting apartments or something, but men, even in New York, you had to, when they found out it was two guys living together, and you weren't students, they were a little apprehensive about it. And just generally, I mean, there was one club that you could dance in a place called Mary's in the Village, and it was upstairs. And
It was the only one in all of the United States.
That in itself was an amazing amount of freedom. No one would come to your help or rescue or something if there's something, because they wouldn't want to be associated with the fact that they were helping somebody gay, because it was absolutely taboo, you know.
No help from the police.
Mostly, the minute you left the totally gay premise, you were on your own, pretty much, and you try to blend into the scenery, because you didn't want to stand out. There were certainly the gays that were flamboyant, but in those days, there was probably more of that in a way than percentage-wise, because they were really in your face and they dared you. A lot of the drag queens and so forth were outrageous in those days, more so I think than today.
Yes.
And it was like I dare you kind of attitude, but a lot of them met with some very unhealthy kind of endings or events. We used to have a code when we couldn't say "I love you" in public. We would say 3.
Or else we'd be sitting talking, or if we were saying goodbye and we were each going our own way, I'd go like this, which meant "I love you" 3 fingers. There are even photographs of us together.
You still occasionally do that. You see me off the airport.
Yeah.
After all this shit.
Yeah, we hug each other.
And I think he's giving the Boy Scout honor or something.
I do 3 fingers, which means it's our code for "I love you." Also, if we're sitting at a table or something, or even sitting on the couch watching TV, I'll do 3 little taps, or he will, and that means "I love you." It's 3 little taps.
I think that relationships are individual. There are straight people who work their problems out and who make a life for themselves, and there are gay people who you just don't see the gay ones as much, because they tend not to be the social ones. We were, because of being involved with the gay press and covering all the events on it, so we became very well known in the gay community as far as a couple. The 60s and 70s became very permissive.
Actually, gay was accepted then. It was love and peace and not war, and very understanding. Also, there was the civil rights movement for black people happened, which we were involved in.
There were a lot of students who were trying
to end
gay sex just because it was an open society.
You have to understand that there was sex everywhere. You'd go into the bars, there'd be a back room. Even if you went into the public library, there was a room upstairs which was open to the public, and I'd seen orgies going on in there. In the men's room in the public library, there was incredible encounters, and the Fenway was in the bird sanctuary in Cambridge. I mean, it was anywhere everywhere, the bushes on the Charles River.
It wasn't labeled the way it had been. You were not a faggot or, even gay. You were not. You were just experimenting. You were free thinking.
Also, there was the drugs
and
that were coming out at the time. A lot of people were smoking pot, which meant that the inhibitions were, much loose. They were down, and
it was a much more liberal kind of feeling about everything: sex, drugs, everything. And then the stabilizer came, AIDS.
Yes.
And your friends started dying out, and
including encounters that we had been involved
people that we
with.
had been involved with died.
We felt very
fortunate,
lucky that we survived
the
and
sexual
didn't get
revolution. But for a while, people were really very.
Well, they weren't having sex.
Or
people weren't getting together. They were so terrified because they didn't know how they could get it. They weren't quite sure.
So having a relationship was certainly to our
Yes.
advantage. We were safe. We immediately knew that we were not, and then became certainly much more cautious. It made us more aware of how lucky we were, not only to have survived and not, been struck by AIDS, but how important and having had a long relationship has been.
We made the most of the era.
But that sort of put everything into a whole different perspective, I think. And then we got old.
Older. Always young at heart.
I have trouble defining the difference between the 90s and the 2000s. They sort of
blend together.
Yeah, and the whole scandal of gay life and gay this and that, and now it's all everywhere on television and then movies, and not even gay movies, but there'll be gay character in it, or it's very sort of in the world that we live in.
It's incredible.
Accepted. Tola Cranston, the ice skater, came to Boston, and I decided I really wanted to go. So I called a newspaper that had just started in Boston, a gay newspaper called Esplanade, and asked them if they would like someone to review, knowing that I could get press seats, because they always hold press seats, even though the engagement is theoretically sold out. Did my review, and the next week the publisher of the paper called me and said, "How would you like to do some more of these things for us?" And I said, "Sure." Consequently, I spent the next 25 years, and I'm still occasionally doing reviews. I did Esplanade until I went out of business, doing 2 and sometimes 3 columns a week. I did work for Tommy's Connection, you name it. Now I still do things for Bay Windows on an occasional basis. While I was doing that, I also began to do photographs for the Tab Society column. A woman did all of her photographs, Mildred Albert. Later years, as she got ill, I was doing the column still with her byline, but she was ill. And when she passed away, Russell Pergament, editor, asked me to go on and continue doing it. I did it for many years. I did the Society column. In the meantime, I became a stringer for the Boston Herald. I did a lot of photographs with Boston Globe, mostly arts, entertainment, society, fashion-oriented world. And then, what else? Then all of a sudden I found myself doing what I'm currently doing, along with some writing, escorting tours for a nonprofit organization, tours all over the world. I do as many as 15 a year. Any place that they go on trips, I go as an escort to the group to see, sort of troubleshoot and see that they get what they've paid for, allowing me to travel for nothing. Although I do it as a volunteer and don't get paid, it's a great perk to travel, and it helps maintain my wanderlust, which I've had all my life. By the 60s, we had been together 15 years, and the 15th was
Was
probably the worst one we ever had.
The 7-year itch, the 7th and the 15th were
the first year
really
was
bad.
very difficult.
First year was bad.
Ralph had a thing with his mother, and I would come home from work, and
A
there would
mother
be
complex.
a note from him.
Loved her.
I've gone to see my mother,
Loved to
and
be
I don't
with
know
her.
if I'll be back, but I'll talk to you. And he
Yeah.
would be gone, and then he would call me and say, "Is it all right if I come back?" So there was a lot of that for the first year, and then things went pretty smoothly for the next until the 7th year, which was very difficult. And then the 15th year was really horrendous.
The main problem was when we had gotten together, Paul said that we were not like all the other gay couples that got involved. They all had like an open relationship, and we were not like that. We were going to have complete fidelity, and that was very important. If we wanted to stay together, we could look, but don't touch. Then during the 15th year, which was the start of the sexual revolution was on, actually, Paul told me that he had indeed been involved with a young fellow. I was like just devastated. I was just...
In my own defense, my indiscretion was wrong, but I came to you with it. You did not discover it. I came to you and told you about John.
Yes.
And it's because I was feeling guilty. It was
Yeah.
not that I was trying, well, obviously I was trying to hide it, but I had enough respect for you to come to you and say, this happened, and that was that.
But we weren't going to break up or anything. It's just...
Oh, at first we were. You
oh yeah, I probably...
you wanted out of the relationship. You wanted it was over.
And then at one point I thought, well, being very dramatic and having seen too many movies, I thought, I'm going to commit suicide. It was in the winter, and
I think you thought about murder too.
I went down. No, I didn't. Unfortunately, I went down to the Charles River, and half of it was frozen over. And I thought I might dramatically walk out onto the ice floes.
Eliza.
And you all are laughing. I do an Anna Karenina in front of the train tracks or something. And then I thought, well, there's another alternative. I might just do something myself. Being quite human, I certainly had fantasized about having sex with someone else, and so there was someone that I had met at a party that was really attractive, who had shown no interest in me at all. And
as long as you could get by his wig, full wig.
I didn't know he wore a toupee.
Everybody else did. I
at the
certainly
time.
did.
And I just went right to his apartment. I said, would you like to have something develop between the two of us? And he looked me up and down and said, okay. So wanting to get back at Paul because he had really hurt me, I told Paul what I had done, and Paul just flipped out. He just exploded. He said, I have one affair, and this is what you do to me. How could you do this to me? I said, well, look, what did you do? And he said, well, that's different. That's me. And he went to this guy, and he went outside his apartment. He called him. He went out there. He was going to beat him up. And when I said to this guy,
He's going to pull his wig off. That's all.
I said to this guy, let's get together again. He said, I don't want to have anything more to do with you or anything. This was terrible. And then later when you saw him in a bar, you said, well, he is attractive.
Well, he must have gotten a new wig, but I forgot.
I must interject something else. Years later, Paul would tell me that this particular person that he had told me about, that he said was the first one, wasn't the first one at all, that he had been sexually involved with many, many others.
Not many, but others.
Long relationship.
Again, in my defense, you have to take into consideration all those times that Ralph would leave unexpectedly and go home to Mother.
It was a toss-up of
So
being
it
with
was
my mother
partial.
or my lover.
It was,
lover
you know,
went out.
so in a
Went
sense,
out.
it wasn't just that I was, but he'd be gone and the opportunity would come, and I would never know whether he was coming back or not. And there was never any long period of time. But there was a couple of times, one time I think it was 2-3 months.
Yeah, it was.
So, you know, in my own defense, I thought, well, you know,
I
I'm
can
young and
understand
attractive,
that.
and I'm going to, why not?
The best thing we could do, we didn't want to go separately, is just to have three ways that could work. With a three-way,
it certainly helped our waning sexual relationship and our relationship in general. We still love each other, do everything together, laugh a lot, have more fun with each other than anybody else. And the sexual encounters too, it all bonds together.
You know, we were getting involved with people together, and so it became. It wasn't a question then of whether we were cheating. It was to go back to the 50s kind of terminology on each other, because we were doing it basically together.
All just collected so much since we've been together, and at times it was overpowering.
It is now about half.
Fortunately,
of when it was when we moved here. When we had been living in Dorchester in a 6-room,
which was completely packed.
So we had to come into this smaller place. So books, more than half the records, more than half the books, and
clothes you would never wear again from other eras that you could never fit into again.
They were museum pieces.
Furniture, objects of art,
paintings, that behind every bookcase here and under every
magazines.
There is still lots of stuff.
I was so glad. It was like a millstone being lifted off of my neck when more than half of everything we had went. We went through it, and most of the stuff I didn't even realize we had, or we didn't even want.
We still find things we didn't know we had. We've been here 7 years now.
Yeah.
And there are boxes that we've
never unpacked.
And every so often we go looking for something, and Ralph will say, I don't remember that.
Yeah.
And it's been here for 7 years, and we had it long before.
Actually, we sold like hundreds of books. A lot of them were autographed, just to have more room here.
Most of it, well, I would say certainly.
And we also got rid of some furniture.
Almost 75% of the
weeding out, which is good.
You see around the apartment. There's several friends of ours who say, look, why don't you sell all this stuff?
Yeah.
Not all this stuff, but some of this stuff.
Yeah.
I've been collecting autographs for 50, more than 50. I collected autographs before him. I mean, we have a wall that some of our favorites are on, but there's also, as somebody dies, I always go to the file cabinet and pull out a signed picture of them.
If we have them, more than
95% of the time, we have them, no matter who dies.
I would certainly like to weed things out. Unfortunately, too many people just throw things out. They don't even sell them. They say no one would want that. Because I think as you grow older, obviously, you have to weed things out because, otherwise, when you go, it's like an incredible amount of stuff for someone to have to sift through, and then it would just get into the dumpster.
All those paper doll things that you've drawn, and all that artwork of yours, closets full of that stuff of yours.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not just, and a lot of the stuff. You've always been involved.
I love it.
Bought it, except stuff in Europe when I was doing guide touring and stuff.
When we do the house cleaning, which we work on it together,
it's a dirty work in this house.
It's something else because it's a full day and then some.
Most everything that's in this apartment, has a story to it. I can remember getting it, or where I came from, or I've traveled my whole life, and so you pick up stuff. I'm a pack rat by nature, so I love the stuff.
This one is Dickens. She's a little foundling. We found her on a post in Dorchester
at
our old place. Yes. Our cats are our children, and they have actually helped keep us together. We have had actually
5 cats.
Yes, and what we did when
we only have one at the moment.
We put their ashes in Egyptian type containers. We wanted them with us always. This is Pushkin, a Himalayan we had.
This is little Piaf.
She had tourmaline-like green eyes, and this is
Fei Ying, our Siamese.
Fei Ying, our Siamese. She was like a goddess, a cat goddess. Somehow they've all
ended up in Egyptian type containers because the Egyptians loved the cats. They thought of them as gods, and they've been actually the joy to our lives, the cats.
When it looked like it was going to become legal, we thought, well, at least I thought, and I think Ralph thought the same way, how wonderful. But not in reference to us. We actually, after all these years, had no initial plan to get married. And we started slowly to say, do you think we should do this, or is leave well enough alone? The least little demonstration that was going to go on, we were there. We carried our 49 years together sign as a in-your-face kind of rebellion.
Well,
there was no such thing as longevity in relationships, and
yes.
Any way they could attack us. Some of these people that were, and I'm not putting down religion as a whole, but some of these religious fanatics that were so hateful. So there was so much anger and hate in their voices and in what they were saying, and the degradation they were putting the people applying to gay people was unbelievable.
They had gathered hundreds of their children. We're talking 5, 6, 7, what have you, and the stuff that was coming out of their mouths.
The anti-gay, the rhetoric,
with the fags, this and that, and the hate coming out of their little mouths. These little angels. I thought, well, these will be the bigots of tomorrow, the homophobes of tomorrow.
But a good portion of them will be the gays of tomorrow.
Some of them will be the gay people of tomorrow.
I think some of the people would have had to reflect after the fact and say, well, you only get the stereotype, or you only get this side of it. Here's people that have been together, and we weren't the only ones. There were a lot of other people that had been together 30, 40 years.
That's right.
That came out.
Yes, they were.
Not as many as there should have, because the older gays grew up in an atmosphere of don't make waves.
Yes.
Because it'll come back to bite you in the ass. It wasn't just your bully on the street who would say, look at the faggots, or something like that.
And
that was hurtful on a one-to-one basis. But when you were getting this from, and as Ralph said, bringing in this whole group of little children, 4, 5, 6-year-old children, and teaching them
what to say
against gay people. That angered me terribly.
And actually, our equality means equality for other people in other things down the line.
I think all causes are connected, but I'm very disappointed to see not so much the women's movement. I think they've been very supportive of gays. But in some cases, the black,
as a whole,
black church, especially the Black Baptist Church on the whole, has not been supportive, and almost everybody I knew that was involved in civil rights, that were involved in civil rights, were gay people that I personally happened to know. I wasn't the only one. There were a lot of us that were involved in civil rights, and I'm a little disappointed that to find that of all people who should understand bigotry and second-class citizenship, the black people certainly should, and they don't in all cases. Turned on the television set for the 11 o'clock news, and they were covering the event that was going on at the Cambridge City Hall, and there was hundreds of people, mostly positive people. So I said to Ralph, it seems so exciting. You could feel the energy, even on the television set. I said, why don't we go look? We're across the street from the Red Line. We just got on the Red Line, got off at Central Square, and it was so over. I get goosebumps. I kid you not. Even today, when I talk about it, get goosebumps. It was so positive. It was so electric. And one of the stupid kind of thing, but one of my favorite things in the world are lilies of the valley. And as we got to this crowd of people, we got there and we found ourselves sort of in the pathway where the couples were going. And a woman handed me a bunch of lilies of the valley. I was so moved by that. We had taken our sign along to show that solidarity, sorry, and saying 49 years together. And it was getting a lot of attention and a lot of play. And I said, "Rob, we're going to do it anyway. Why don't we just get the license here? It's good for the state." We had not made any plans at all until we were there that night. So they took people in the order that you'd got when you came in. They gave you a slip what number you were. And by the time they got to our number, it was 4:30 in the morning. But the time had gone like that because there was something there. And as I said, that energy was so positive, so wonderful. The people that worked at the city hall giving their own time to do this, and there were a lot of straight people involved with this. So we got home after all of that and just sort of fell into bed, ecstatic about the whole situation. And about mid-morning, the phone rang, and this girl that had been a girlfriend of mine in high school called me, and she said, in New Hampshire, she said, I was getting ready for work this morning and watching Good Morning America, and there you were with Ralph.
Oh, I must say this because we almost forgot about it. When they were doing the equal marriage ads and what have you, the people that are in charge of it asked us if we would be the poster boys for that particular thing, and so the two of us were put on the posters. They had been together for 40, how much was it at the time?
48 years.
48 years. How much longer do they have to wait? Also, there was a TV commercial
that played
that
dozens of times on all the channels, even.
Ever. And it was on everywhere, and like friends of ours would call and say, I'm so sick of seeing
there were
four faces
couples
on the television.
4 couples, and with us it would say, Paul and Ralph have been together 49 years.
How much longer
do they have to wait? So we got married on the 29th of May, 2004. And that was our 49th anniversary, and now we had...
Oh, and Paul wanted it outside where we had met in the park.
In Central Park, so we had it here at the Boston Garden.
It was so incredible. Because we had been together, it happened on our 49th anniversary. The Globe was there to do a story on it, and we had our wedding reception at the Ritz, which was right across the street. And when we came back from the wedding reception with our wedding party at the apartment here, we turned on the television, and it had been part of the TV news. And if you don't think that's an incredible thing to see your wedding on the news.
And the Ritz sent complimentary champagne to us at the dinner we ate in the main dining room, and
they gave us gifts.
Gave us Ritz robes
that sell for $100 a piece.
Those wonderful, cuddly.
I suppose for the honeymoon night,
terry cloth robes that they gave us as a gift as a couple. I don't very often think about it.
I don't know either.
And when I do, it's sort of depressing because Ralph is much more comfortable in him being alone if it comes. I mean, I go out a lot more than he does. Not so much now, but I used to, and going to review things and going and all those years on the road with Dietrich, and so he is comfortable, much more so. I rattle when he goes away, like conventions or something, and he's gone for 3-4 days. I rattle him.
He has a real problem being alone. He can't.
I tend to drink too much if he's gone. I call him, no matter where he is, and I'll say, oh, no, I won't call you. And then, of course, the first night I call, oh, did you get there all right? And so I think I
love you, I miss you. Tell them on camera. Yeah. Tell them what you say.
No, I don't. I couldn't care less. But no. I just think he's better adjusted in that one respect than I am. I believe that life would be easier for him than it would be for me if one of us if we were the one left. And it's gonna, unless it happens that we're both killed by some anti-faggot fanatic
Oh,
or
or
in
what
an
have
air
you.
crash or something. But otherwise, I think he's more. I hate to say
Self-sufficient?
Well, I was going to say self-sufficient, but you're not.
See?
In so many ways,
out of his mouth.
you're not. It is. I was
I
going to
said
say that, but that in so many ways you're not self-sufficient. You're very dependent.
Well, we're dependent on each other for certain things.
But
He does certain things, I do certain things. It all goes together.
I
We
worry
help
that
each other.
you would eat jars and stuff instead of taking care of yourself.
I've told Paul that if and when that happens, which is logical,
Not
unless
if, when.
you go in a car crash or something together, if and when that happens, I would like him to find someone else.
The old age home, I'll have to go looking.
Be happy, enjoy life, and then after, with the understanding that when it's over for him, in the world beyond, hopefully our souls will unite and we'll be together for all eternity. Very romantic, but who knows what's on the other side.
I don't believe in any kind of hereafter.
I don't either.
Well,
but
by what you
who
said, you
knows?
implied that
well,
there's a possibility.
maybe we would unite in death. The search and finding each other and be together spiritually or whatever. I don't believe in heaven or any of that stuff.
If you're implying that
After-
if something happens to you, I'm to commit suicide, you better get
I certainly
over
am
it.
not implying that. I said go have a good time, enjoy life.
Yeah, but you
Don't
said
just-
united in death.
Oh, right. Don't just fold up and deteriorate like his mother did when his father
I'm not
died.
my mother.
She just...
Well,
you know.
my father was 51 when he died also.
So I wouldn't want that. I'd want you to be happy. And I think that's like an impossibility, probably finding someone
I
else.
probably leave a curse on you.
After, what have you. But so then you have friends and just enjoy life as much as possible.
But we have each a song that is associated with us. Whenever Tara's theme from Gone with the Wind comes on, we have to kiss.
Yeah. No matter where it is.
Yeah, and sometimes there have been some occasions that
When we're outside, like in a crowded place or a restaurant or something, it's Tara's theme.
we have to find a
It was
way
all-
to...
I want to tell you something. I do it, but I don't. It's not like a kiss on the lips, like incredible passion, like a love scene from Gone with the Wind. But we kiss. We have to kiss.
I'm
If-
Red Velvet, he's Scarlet.
Right.
Scarlet Woman.
Yeah. But with his theme, it's tenderly, and it's not really
Fortunately,
played
it's not very popular.
that much. But occasionally, like we were at some function a while back, and suddenly Tenderly was playing, and he was across the room sitting down at a table talking to some people, and I went over to him, and as I came toward him, he started to laugh, and I said, I just want to tell you something. And,
Except you didn't go. You just...
yeah, but that's the way it is.
Talk about what a fool I can be. Several years ago, I bought Ralph a wristwatch that has red and scarlet on the face of the watch, but it also has a music box that has a little lever that plays that fucking theme.
Tara's theme. Occasionally, when we're watching a
We'll be at
movie
the
or
movies
something in a
and
movie
we'll
theater,
hit it, or-
I'll hit it accidentally, and all of a sudden Tara's theme is playing, and I just look around as if I don't know what's happening. And so,
So I'm a glutton for punishment.
yeah, that's true. And Tara's theme. Is it down here?
Yeah. Unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on where you're coming from, I don't have the readily available recording of Tenderly. Each year, over a while, we did this because we looked much too young to have been together 47 years. Believe that, you believe anything. the Ralph changes it every year to go along, and this year we had to add the bottom, the 1 year now. It keeps having to change. It's getting a little shocking. Like that.
Aren't we ever?
Well, it's about. And then we decided at some point, people will say, "You put together 50 years," sort of doubting us and so forth. And so Ralph went through the archives and dug out some of the pictures
To be copied.
over our 50 years, starting with the very week we met in New York, taking one of those little machines and
Check
progressing
those profiles out.
the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and up to the 49th year. This is the day that we got our license to get married, and then this is the 50th year, our wedding.
No, 49th. We got married on the 49th.
Oh, the 49th year. I'm sorry. That same, right. That was our wedding on the 49th year.